All right, to get started, we are going to begin breaking down this 1 by 10 by 8 piece of cedar wood. And the first section we're going to cut out is the back side of the owl house. The length is going to be 27.5 inches long. The next section we're going to cut out is going to be the front of the house, and the length will be 15 inches long. Here I'm just cutting off the rough section of the wood and ensuring that I have a square edge. For the remaining cuts, you're going to have the side pieces, which are going to be 17 inches long, and then we're going to cut the floor. That's going to be 8 by 8, and then finally the roof will be cut to 9.5 to 11.5 inches. Here I'm about ready to cut the two side pieces to width in one cut on the table saw, but before doing that I wanted to make sure that I had the cathedral green pattern centered on the wood. So what I'm doing here is using my tape measure to kind of get an idea on where I need to set my fence on my table saw so that I can ensure that the pattern is in the middle of the wood once it's finally cut. Now that the wood grain pattern has been centered, I'm just flipping the wood over to the other side to ensure that I have a clean cut and cutting it to its final width. On the table saw, I continue to cut everything to their final width, and then after doing that, I move back over to the miter station and cut everything to the final length, giving each piece its final dimension. Now that we have all the pieces cut out to their final dimension, we can start working on the side pieces and determining the angle of the roof. Now to do that, I had to put everything together as if I was going to assemble it, and then place the front facing piece of the owl house onto the box, and then at the top of the front facing piece I could make a marking on the side panel to give me my angle. That angle ended up being 15 degrees, and it's not mentioned in the Audubon Society instructions, so I can tell you here it's 15 degrees. Okay, now that we've determined that the angle for the roof is going to be 15 degrees, we can start cutting the final cut on the side panels. One thing to note is that this cedar wood has a rough side and a smooth side, and I'm building the owl house so that the rough side of the cedar is facing outward. So for this cut, I laid down the panel with the rough side facing upward for the 15-degree cut. With the left side now cut, we can start working on the right side. And we're going to do the same thing, keeping the miter saw at the same angle. We're just going to simply take the right side and flip the inside upward to make the 15-degree cut. This will make sure that both sides have a rough finish on the outside on the left and right. For this next cut, you're going to go from a 15-degree miter cut to a 15-degree bevel cut. And to set this up, you're going to want to have the smooth side of the board or the inside of the board facing the blade, while you have the length set so that the blade goes completely through the board but just barely skims the top of the board at the bottom. Here I'm beginning to work on the entry point for the owl house, and to do that I need to establish a center point for the hole saw that I'm going to use to cut the hole here. And being a one-man video crew, this is a little hard to show by myself, so I'm going to walk through the steps here and then later give you more of a hands-on presentation of how I got to the center point to make the hole. All right, just want to give a quick explanation of what that process was all about. Basically what I'm trying to do is establish the entrance of the owl house, and the entrance is going to be drilled out with this hole saw, and what I need to do is find a center point so that I can get this drill bit to make sure I'm drilling in the center of the wood. So what I did was the owl house entrance needs to be 10 inches from the bottom, so I measured 10 inches here, then I measured an additional 13 inches right here to get my 3-inch width here. And then once those top and bottom lines are established, I just simply transfer that line to here and to here, and then of course do it here on the bottom, here and here. And then now that those two lines are established, I just take that piece of wood and do a crisscross pattern to establish one mark here, and then crisscross again to establish this other mark right here, and then X marks the spot. There you go. Here I'm taking an awl to create a starting point for the drill bit on the hole saw to bite into so that it doesn't drift while I'm making the cut. This ensures that you get a nice clean cut and you don't have any kind of jagged edges. I'm also going to use these clamps here to mount the piece of wood to my table to keep it nice and stable, therefore again ensuring a good cut. And then finally, word of the wise, you might want to wear a sawdust mask while doing this. I had no idea how much dust this thing was going to create, and really wish I would have had my mask on when doing the cut. Dust mask. Woo. Now I'm just smoothing out the entry point with some sandpaper. Here I'm drawing a line that's 1/2 inch from the bottom, and this will be how I know where to mount the bottom edge of the floor when it comes time to build the box. Now that we have our line established for where the floor is going to go, we can begin working on the first part of assembly. And that's going to be starting with the floor and then the right side of the owl house. We're going to take some glue here and then attach that, and we're going to use the back side of the owl house as a guide to let me know exactly how I need to fit the side piece on, and then we'll follow up with a pin nailer to fasten things and keep them in place while the glue dries. Now with the right side of the owl house attached, we can start working on the left side, which is just going to be a repeating of the process we did for the right side. Now that we have the two sides attached for the owl house, we can start focusing on the back end of the box. So I'm just flipping over the box and then applying some glue, and I'll be following up with some brad nails. Now that we have the box mostly assembled, we can start focusing on attaching the hinges and the roof. To do that, I'm using this combination square to ensure that the hinges are placed in the right spot. And I'm following up with a self-centering drill bit to drill the holes into the hinges and ensure that the screws are centered when they are screwed into the hinge. And finally, I'm using this extension bit right here to help me get into these tight spaces using these tiny screws. Well, the hinge is now attached to the back of the outhouse. I'm turning my focus onto the roof. And again, I'm using the self-centering bit to drill the holes for the screws, and then following up with the extension bit to get these screws into these tiny slots. With the miter saw unplugged, I'm starting to focus on cutting the curves. Now to do that, I need to determine the center point of where the blade will drop to cut the curves. And I'm using a scrap piece of wood that's been cut to the dimension of the facing piece. And then once I determine the center point, I've locked in the sliding mechanism for the miter saw. And then here I'm working to determine the depth and getting that locked in so that whenever I make the cut, it will be at a 1/4 inch deep. With the center point and the depth locked in, I'm ready to move on to the base piece of the owl house. To make these cuts, you're going to want to cut the curves at a 1/2 inch apart from one another. And to do this, I'm just using my guide and setting it 1/2 inch for each cut for a total of 6 cuts. Off camera, I decided to go ahead and attach a perch, which is included on the inside of the owl house opening here, which you can see at the bottom of the screen. I didn't do this on camera because it's pretty straightforward. You just brad nail it in and glue it. Very easy to do. Now I'm attaching 2 braces to the roof. This is to stabilize the roof over time and keep it from warping. One final thing I'm adding to the roof is a lever that's going to hold up the roof and keep it open so that you can gain access to it to either clean it out or provide any maintenance you might need over time. As you can see, this is a very simple design. All you need is a scrap piece of wood and a screw. So first what you want to do is just find the center point of the scrap of wood, find the center point of the roof, and then drill your hole in the center point of the scrap of wood into the center point of the roof, and then finally attach a screw to make the simple lever. There you go. All right, we're getting close to wrapping this one up, so I thought I'd do kind of a review of everything so far and talk about some of the changes I made. So this plan came from the Audubon Society, and it has a 2-pager PDF that's really easy to follow. I got all the measurements from there, and I followed everything to a T. It suggests that you get a 1x10x8 piece of wood to make everything. I thought I bought that. I'm going to check with my receipt, make sure that I had 8 feet, because I ended up needing a little bit more for the floor. And fortunately, I had some extra cedar laying around that I was able to build a floor piece with the extra wood that I had laying around. So, most part, this is real easy to follow, so I highly recommend it. If you're looking to build a Screech-Owl house, just go to the Audubon Society and download their plan. So, what did I do different then? What I did differently was added these support braces on the roof to keep the roof nice and flat.
this is, a single piece of wood. The wood grain's running this way, so it's going to expand and contract like this. But what I noticed was that the board was trying to cup up right here. So I did the braces to hopefully keep the roof nice and flat. I didn't glue anything here. I just used screws. So that should allow for movement over time. The other thing I came up with was a way to keep the roof propped open whenever you're trying to clean it out. I can imagine if you're trying to do this on a ladder 10 feet in the air, and they can be kind of precarious. So I thought it'd be a good idea to include a way to keep this thing propped open, and so far it seems to work pretty well. And then finally, before I close this thing up, this is going to be the inside of the front right here. And I decided to go ahead and add a little perch for the little guys here. So, while mom and dad are out, they can pop up here and hopefully look out their window and see what's going on. So that's something I added. I'm no Audubon expert whatsoever. From what I've read, that's probably okay to go with. So that's what I did. Now, the other thing that I thought about doing and decided against was putting a perch on here. And from what I've read is that is going to allow for other critters to have easier access to getting inside the house. So you don't want that. So I went ahead and went with the little kerf indentions here. And I actually like the way it looks. So hopefully this will be something that the owls like and have easy access to getting inside the house here, and we'll encourage them to move in. That's what we're trying to do. So anyway, that's what I did for the changes there. You have any comments or anything like that, just let me know. I'll be glad to answer what I can.
Okay, so we're wrapping things up now, and we're going to finish up by applying glue to the sidewalls here, and then brad nailing in the faceplate for the owl house. And once we get done with that, then we are complete. So if you made it through this video and still with me, I really appreciate you joining and watching. If you like it, please hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you.